It is 7 o'clock in the morning, and there's my good buddy Dewey Freeman. Dewey, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. Just fed horses, and I'm still cherishing the ride that we had yesterday together, me and my horses. How about you?
I, I'm doing great, and I remember at the beginning of the lockdown, people would very earnestly check in on one another, and it felt
Mm-hmm.
very genuine, more genuine than the "how you doing" that we
Mm-hmm.
normally do, and I got to repeating this one phrase so much I made a little sign so I could just hold it up in the Zoom window that said, "Is it okay to be okay?
Mm,
Do I
that's a
have
cool
to
sign.
be sad or upset? There's some genuine pain and grief and hardship this last year, the lost year. And yet, my experience has been that I haven't seen people as up and engaged and excited and leaning in than I have in years,
Oh wow.
myself included. I mean, and my circle, and it could be because we turned it up to 11, because as we've spoken before, the thing that you can control, the only two things you control in life are your blueprint, what you're going to do that day, and your state. And
Mm-hmm.
by having a positive state, it affects the state of those around you. So that's a choice. So we just choose and chose to be on the, hey, let's find the silver lining here.
Let's look at
uh,
what's good.
and and so today, in thinking about that and thinking about choice, we've talked about choice. um, I'm really interested in the word legacy. And as elders, I think this comes up, but I've thought of legacy, gosh, I know when it started, when I had my son 48, 48 years ago.
Wow.
And I don't know if that was young or not. It's just what it was. And so today I thought we'd talk about legacy.
When you say legacy, and particularly with your son, what's that mean to you? What's
Specifically, with it relates to my son, I am a 13th generation Sylvester.
wow.
So I've got paper that traces back to 1634 when William J. Sylvester landed in Massachusetts. It was in that all the boats that were coming during the time of the Mayflower. It was that year or the next year, and someone will Google it and tell me. And he had 7 sons, and I'm descended from the second son.
No
And
kidding.
yeah, and so I was given my genealogy when I was 21 by my dad, and it had been created by a great aunt and uncle who traveled the United
Mm-hmm.
States researching church records and things like that to put together a comprehensive list. And I thought this name, this DNA, though I didn't think of it that way, but it was like this name will continue now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what legacy, that's one of the meanings of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I having studied it quite a bit and knowing the types of jobs and the kinds of people and the kinds of things that DNA represents and embodies, my hope was to try to um, make sure that he had everything he needed until he left the nest to be able
Mm-hmm.
to carry that on and just keep going with it. So that's how I look at it. It's a long view, I'm sure.
Yeah. And has he carried that on?
Very much so.
That
Very
is
much so.
so cool.
Yeah, very much so. We it's funny, we talk about, my daughter and I talk about how my grandson, she said, he's all Sylvester. He got all the genes.
That's pretty cool.
And what do you think of when I say legacy?
Well, that's really interesting, what you just spoke of, because I'm actually I'm the oldest living male in my family at this point. And none of the males that would carry on my name have had children.
Mm.
And my history with children is sort of long and tumultuous.
We've talked, yeah.
And what's really interesting to me is, so legacy to me has much more to do with what I've been able to contribute to the world.
And I want to talk about that, because I believe that there's multiple meanings to it.
Right. And actually, I have to say, my heart, I feel sadness that I am not able to say or speak to legacy the way that you spoke to it.
Oh.
Just in that sense. I know that, I have a history that goes way back also, but not as clearly defined as yours.
I think I'm fortunate in that, and when I was interesting, because that was 47 years ago that I was given that. Oh, hey, you're part of something way bigger than you are.
Right.
And about 20 years ago, there's a professor, Sylvester, out at the university, and he says, "Do you have your family tree?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I do." And he goes, "I believe we're related." And I said, his wife is a genealogist. So he said, "Send over the family tree and I'll see if I can fill in some holes." And it turns out he's descended from the 7th son of William J. Sylvester.
No kidding.
Yeah. So we're 13th cousins.
That's quite a separation and quite a connection.
When you talk about the things that you do in your life, someone mentioned to me, and the frame he put on legacy was the tracks we leave. And I think that's where, I'm a visual thinker. We've established that early on in the show. And I think of the tracks we leave and the lives we touch. You, sir, have, with 80,000 contact hours, have left just a mountain of tracks.
I would agree. One of the interesting things with that, for me, and the truth that, before I say what I'm going to say, I do get I've gotten a fair amount of feedback on how I've affected people.
Yeah.
And very positive. I mean, even on Father's Day, I had a number of former students and or clients contact me and say, "I get that you're not my biological father, and you're my father." Yeah. The other piece, though, that is a really interesting piece for me, and Kimberly and I were talking about this the other day, is a lot of how I have affected people, I don't know.
Right.
Super quick story. I was in my mid-20s. I went and my mother was a teacher. I was back in Ohio right at the end of the school year. And I went to the school she taught at, which was the school I went to in kindergarten and first through 5th grade. And I walked into the room with my kindergarten teacher. and her name is Mrs. Sowers. And she was packing up stuff, and I reintroduced myself, and she was thrilled to see me, which I was shocked that she remembered me. But and what it turned out to be is she was retiring. That was her very last day.
Wow.
And the fact that I happened to be in Ohio and happened to walk into her room, to me, was sort of amazing. And what I did, however, was tell her how much she affected me. She was really, she was so incredibly kind to me. And in those days, kindergarten was a half a day. So I was there 3.5 hours a day. But her kindness and her generosity of spirit and was really one of the first.
How long ago was that?
That I
Went back.
spoke with her.
Yeah.
That would have been 44, 45 years. Something like that.
Did you, at that time, had you had the experience of anybody coming up to you and telling you how you had made an impact in their life?
Not so much at that time. I was pretty young. I don't remember the exact year. I could actually, interestingly enough, I could probably figure that out. But I was 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there.
About 5 years ago was my 45th high school reunion.
Right.
And I was very blasé about high school and paper, the diploma, who cares? It was, didn't matter. Right. And so I wasn't that connected to high school. Yet what got me to go to the reunion was I said to the organizers, why is it that we focus on all the students we went to school with and connecting? Could someone go find some of the teachers that impacted us? And they said, well, we've never done that before. I don't know. And I said, just find. Turns out they found my English teacher, who had probably the most profound effect on me, my creative writing teacher, Miss Livingston, who was probably, now that I think about it, was 20, right? She was probably just out of school, 2021.
Right.
And they said, we found her, and she's coming. And I said, okay, I'm going to go. And I saw her. I was there early, and then someone said, oh, Miss Livingston's here. And she's no longer Miss Livingston. And I went up to her and I said, I need to tell you something. And I just took her aside and I told her 3 different stories, the very specific remembrances of class that profoundly impacted my life and that I had thought about on a fairly regular basis, and told the story of those things because the lessons were so important. And we just started bawling, both of us. That it was just profound. And the reason I did it was to let someone know that they made a difference,
Right.
and to do one of the simplest things in life to me that is free, is recognition.
Yes, recognition and sharing gratitude.
Yeah.
As soon as you said the simplest thing in life, the first word that came to mind was gratitude.
Yeah. And when you can close that loop, even if it's 50 years later, I think it helps you understand, and it helps me for sure, for me, because the same way I've had people come from computer animation who've come and said, thank you so much. The 2 years I worked with you, started a career where I've, it's changed my life. I've had hundreds and hundreds of those stories. But here's how that lands on me, which is that every interaction I have with someone may be the thing that they remember for the rest of their life.
Right.
So I need to show up and make it matter.
Well, and that piece I agree with. And there's, at this point in my life, and this is speaking from a place of eldership, is that not only do I want to make everything I do matter, there's two other pieces that I think about. One is every minute I spend, I will not get that minute back.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do I want to make it matter for those who I'm interacting with, I want to make it matter for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I can make it matter for myself, I will affect people positively.
Mm-hmm.
And so that piece is incredibly important to me. The other piece, and this goes together with the gratitude, and I actually heard this saying from my friend Mark Rashid, so I want to give him credit, and this was a number of years ago, he said, in my life, as I end my life, he's not ending his life, but he's talking about aging. He said, when I die, I want to owe as few people as possible an apology.
Wow.
And
wow.
And that statement hit me to the point where I've actually gone back and found numbers of.
Made a list?
Yeah. And have contacted some of those people and apologized for.
Tell me about that. Cause I had a guy who, is a story around our house, the interaction that caused him to a few years later call and apologize. What's that like?
Humbling and freeing. And that's incredibly, there's a word that's not coming. Has to do with letting go of, with settling, with and with closing a circle, closing a loop, which is part of what you spoke about with your teacher.
If someone's listening to this and they're thinking of people in their life that they might want to call or write or however they contact them, the thing that struck me about this particular interaction was that he was in had been in a coaching situation, and he was coached to call. And so he only did it out of an obligation and felt like, okay, I checked that box, I'm absolved. And had he not told me that his coach had told him, and I thought that it was an authentic reach out because he genuinely felt that there was he had behaved wrongly, I'd moved on, but it cleared for him. It did not work. In fact, it made it a little worse.
Exactly. So what made it worse for you?
It was not authentic. It wasn't, it wasn't. It's I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, fuck off. It's like, no, in martial arts, if we, oh, I punched, oh, God, I didn't hold, and I clipped you a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Grandmaster would, yeah, do not say you're sorry. We're not allowed to say you're sorry on the mat.
Really?
Not at all. Not at all.
And you would,
Change your behavior.
right.
Don't do that thing again. Notice. Now he said that doesn't work in personal relationships. In personal relationships, you better learn how to say you're sorry. But and change your behavior.
I love the piece about changing behavior. What would you throw in, or what would you suggest versus saying, I'm sorry? Let's say you and I were on the mat working with each other, and one or the other of us reacted too strongly to and clipped the other one. What would you suggest?
First, I'd check in. Are you okay?
Perfect.
And then you'd say, I'm fine. It's nothing. I said, I have to learn better control.
Exactly.
So state the thing that you need to be better at, which will anchor it.
Yep.
And that situation will anchor for you. And I need to have better control. And then say, I don't know if I'd say anything else. Honestly, this was so drilled into our head, and you know what it's like when sensei's drilling things. It becomes in your bones, and gosh, that was 27 years ago that started, and so that's very deep in me. However, I do know the power of apology, sincere apology, and followed with the please help me not do that again. I need your support.
Exactly. The wording I would use would be something like, I just harmed you through my lack of awareness.
Now, would you say you're sorry?
No, not
Let's just state the fact.
What I would say is, would you forgive me?
Oh,
because that's what we're really after.
Yeah, good.
So,
good. Yeah, there you go.
So, and I do think, I work with people a lot about not saying I'm sorry.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, and it's. So yesterday when we were riding, there were 7 of us. At one point, we were on the trail, and my horse got up behind another horse pretty close, and the other horse did a warning kick. And I backed my horse off, and I just met this guy. In fact, right now I can't remember his name. And what I said was, this is a quote. Hey, dude, I'm sorry, I got up behind you too close. Same way if like you're in the grocery store and you think, oh, what I need is right over there, and you turn around and you run into somebody. In those instances, I do think that there's a societal piece of it's an in the moment kind of thing. If I were really with somebody that I have a relationship with, it's like, oh, what I did harmed you. Will you forgive me? What I did harmed you because I was being selfish. What I did harmed you because I was being unaware. What I did harmed you. And I might even ask, did that harm you? And where that would be the same thing that like if we were in the dojo and, we were practicing some technique and you clipped me or I clipped you, and did that harm you? What you said, are you okay? And
you've I think through this conversation, this always happens to us, buddy. We've come on to this deeper truth, and in this case, a a tool that someone listening could use, because I had never considered that sentence,
Did this harm you?
to
Do I
say,
believe that harm you?
would you forgive me? I behaved poorly. I did not.
Right.
I was not in integrity. I was breaking. We've talked about the tenets that, our Marshall
Right.
tenets, right? I was not I was not in congruity with those. Probably wouldn't say it like that. Would you forgive me? And to your point, it's not, you are looking for forgiveness, but it makes me think of something we've talked about as a recurring theme: to be self-aware and present enough to say that would indicate an ability to be vulnerable that may feel very uncomfortable.
Exactly. Vulnerability. And Brene Brown speaks about vulnerability
Yeah,
being
she does.
courage.
Yep. Yep.
And a way to put that, because, and especially, I mean, our broadcast, our show is primarily for men. I do hope many people watch it, both men and women. And one of the things that I do think that is incredibly powerful is the process of being courageous.
Yeah.
And that being courageous creates, if we're really vulnerable, we will be courageous. It takes an incredible amount of courage to be vulnerable, an incredible amount of courage to say, Mark, what I did either was harmful or at least possibly harmful to you. Will you forgive me? And if I really want to go deeper in it, I would say, will you forgive me? And I will be looking at how I can change my behavior. If I want to go even another step, I might say, would you give me feedback on what would be helpful with my behavior change?
And in the deeper relationship that you're nurturing and you're continuing, as we've talked about, vulnerability, that's because that's a little bit of crisis bonding right there, because you had that, there was there was some thing that got you go like that, right? And that's just another brick, in the wall of trust that you're building. That's probably not a wall, but it's, as we've talked, again, I love how we keep coming to these continuing themes. There was a time a couple of years ago where we'd lost one of our cats the night before a major event that we were hosting, and we were devastated. This is only 3 years ago. We're absolutely devastated. And the next morning, people had flown in from all over the country for this event, and we're like, how are we going to do this? And our co-teacher, his mom had passed away 3 days earlier. And so it was very, very sullen. And we're running a storytelling conference. We need to be up and cheerful and storytelling. And we had a choice. Do we just sit on this and just deal with it later? 4 days from now, we'll deal with it then. Or do we say, hey, if we're not an 11 as we usually are, here's what happened. We just want you to just know that. And we were vulnerable, right? Because there's this sense that the teacher the leaders need to be, strong and, like that. And yet here we're saying, hey, we're human and this has impacted us, and, you know, cut us a little slack, though we didn't say those words. Within 2 hours, the level of depth that the students had gotten to in terms of attaching to their personal stories and telling really deep, hard truths about themselves and coming to grip with that story is what has shaped them, is what we figure out, like, what's the story that made you who you are. We'd never seen them get to that level that quick before. Right. And it dawned on me in our after action that vulnerability is contagious.
I often talk, this is going back to earlier times, earlier shows. I often talk about creating an opening.
Yeah, yes, you do.
What you did was create an opening. What my guess, because I know you, this is more than a guess, this is a pretty sure thing, is that you created an opening, and when others were willing to step into it, you were completely available for contact with them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Kimberly was, and I'm sure
100%.
Whoever else.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of that. Your person that came to you because he was coached to come and say, I'm sorry. The underlying intent probably was there for that person. And it was probably scary for him to come and speak to you. What wasn't there was the vulnerability and opening for you to be able to step into and say, thank you. And I see that all the time. It's like, and you even see my neighbors who we're very good friends with, they have a 5-year-old girl and a 2-ish plus old boy. And I was down by the road where I can be able to see and hear them, and something happened, and the dad said to the daughter had, I don't know whether she threw something or I forget I don't know exactly what happened. But the dad said, you need to say sorry to your brother. And she goes, sorry.
Right.
And
right. Exactly. There you go.
And it was like,
that's the 5-year-old sorry that we keep in our back pocket for our whole life.
Right. And it's like, and here's what's interesting about that to me is coming back around is I don't, and I'm thinking out loud now, I don't know if we can actually leave a full legacy in the way that, at least that I would want to leave a legacy, if I'm not able to truly ask for forgiveness for the mistakes I've made.
So let me take that one step further to say, can you forgive yourself?
Absolutely.
Oh, there you go.
But you're right. It's like that's the other level of forgiveness that we need.
Right.
Like there's a person, for instance, and this is what I mean. There's a person who's done tremendous amount of work and study and contributed a lot to the world of dealing with trauma in the world of psychology. He also, this was maybe 3 to 4 years ago, ended up basically his program, people in it revolted because he was so mean to them.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't mean, and literally he lost his program. And it went into legal issues and all kinds of different things. But it's like, because of his behavior, because he was actually traumatizing people while he was writing and teaching about trauma, his legacy is going to be highly tarnished. And because that's going to be the first thing that people think about.
Yeah.
Oh, the guy was a blank. And, oh, yeah, he did okay with sharing this information. But it's really, that to me is really a big deal. And, oh, go ahead.
It's making me think, and I'm going to dig into my improv bag here, because in improv we're coached to not talk about the thing, but to talk about how we feel about the thing.
Right.
And in this case, we don't remember what the man did. We remember how the man made us feel.
Exactly. And exactly. So and we as men are so tied into doing.
Aren't we, though?
It's like, well, I did it right. I apologize to Mark.
Check the box, goal hit, next.
Right. And you know, how do we connect into our partners, our wives, our children, our parents? Do we ask for forgiveness? Do we ask to be seen in all of our being? Because if we're not asking for forgiveness, we're also not allowing ourselves to be seen.
And it's at a low point where we've done something that needs to be forgiven. We've not lived up to our own expectation of ourselves, or we've just been human, right? And we've just, hey, I'm trying to walk a path and I stray often. I'm,
Right.
often. And so you're saying, oh, guess what? Guess what? We're human. And again, that just that acknowledgement with someone that you care about creates an opening for them to be closer to you, and
Right.
rather than farther and apart, where if you don't, God, it's funny how these things come back, because if you don't trust that they will not leave because of that little fuck up or a big fuck up. I mean, it could be a big
Right.
one. And sometimes there's big ones that you don't get to walk away from. I mean, you don't get out of, right? There are those, but mostly it's a life full of little, our therapist would say, hey, if the thing he said makes you feel, just say that, and then that'll stop. Just go, it didn't make me feel good. And it's shocking how powerful that is, to both hear that at the same time. He gives her permission to do that, gives me permission to do that too. It's not just her.
Absolutely.
It's just, we both have permission. If it's like, boy, that didn't feel good. And the frequency of that has dropped over the years to rarely does that happen anymore, because there is that awareness.
Right.
I believe.
So part of what you're speaking to is a level of integrity it takes to be in a relationship.
Yes.
And so let me go back. This is a piece. This came up in the retreat. It came up and it hit me, I don't know, a few months ago. Because a big part of what you're talking about is trust here. And integrity. And in my career, I have not put this together till recently. I have many people come to me and say, I don't trust other people. I don't trust anybody.
Hmm.
What struck me is, if I'm a person who does not trust other people, there's a very high likelihood that I will not be trustworthy.
I instantly thought that he's projecting.
That I'm projecting?
He's projecting. The person who is projecting his lack of trust about himself.
Right.
He doesn't
Agreed.
trust himself. Yeah.
Well, but he would also not be trustworthy, because here's what my thought is with this. Is if I say that I don't trust people, what that will mean is that I probably won't be integrous with them. Because if I said to you, which is completely made up because I trust you implicitly, I trust you with my life. But if I said, you're very welcome. If I said, I don't trust you, Mark, what that does is give me permission to not be trustworthy. Wow. That gives me permission to lie to you. It gives me permission to manipulate you. It gives me permission to, whatever. And even on small things, like we were supposed to do this show yesterday, and I texted and said, look, I got this invitation to go ride. And can we reschedule? And it was like, what I had to do was trust you to, one, hear me, two, say whether or not you could reschedule, and three, is not judge me for asking for a shift. Well, you did all of those things. It was like, oh, can we do tomorrow? I mean, it was like, it was way too simple. But if I had not trusted you, I would have made up, oh, I had this emergency, or oh, whatever.
Which meant you lied, which means you were not trustworthy.
Right.
There you go.
Which means then what that would have meant is I would not have been, you would not have asked me the question about how was your ride.
Right.
And I would not have been able to say, yeah, it was all, I mean, it was one of the most beautiful rides I've taken. My horse has been really injured. This was the first ride to test out his soundness. It was, I got to hang with men that I hadn't, some that I knew that are good friends, some that I hadn't known. I mean, all of those things, but I wouldn't have been able then to share all of that stuff with you had I lied and wasn't trustworthy. Now, you could have come back and gone, no, we have plans for today. It's the 4th of July. And I would have gone, okay. But in all of that, my next statement is, what legacy do we want to leave? Do we want to leave a legacy of people going, you know, Mark was a hell of a guy and he lied a fair amount?
Or the Hollywood legacy is, Mark's Mark.
Yeah. Or do you want to leave a legacy of Mark created this, Mark was this, Mark was that, and he had a level of integrity that many people don't have, and I could really count on.
I would, if I'm thinking about that, what I would really want is, let me tell you a story about Mark. Exactly. And have them recount some interaction, which would be that, for me, make every moment memorable. It was a moment that we shared that created a memory for them, for for the last many, many years, we we still give gifts, but we've de-emphasized the physicality of the gift and suggested that the true gift is the memory that is created as a result. And that's typically through an experience rather than a thing, that you can have a shared experience, that you feel something. And that has proven true. And thinking about piling on those experiences, so when we have that bad experience that doesn't end well, and and whether we ask for, we're not even aware enough to know that we should ask for forgiveness or even say we're sorry, we're too pissed off, and we don't resolve.
Right.
The memory, that's memory too. That's not a good
True.
one. That's not a good one. And so that legacy is just if that's how you are, you show up, you leave a legacy of those. The tracks you left are not ones that people want to follow. I think we want to end right there and ask people to kind of challenge themselves around the tracks they're going to leave, and not wait until you're in your late 60s or early 70s to pay attention to that, and pay attention to the fact that you are making a difference in people's lives and make a positive difference in their lives, which has the effect of being very positive for yourself.
That's a great place to end. And my encouragement is to walk through the world vulnerable and courageous.
Dewey Freeman, I love it. I love you, man.
Love you too.